My husband didn't just break a vow. He built a lie I lived inside for years. This isn't about a moment of weakness. It was planned, rehearsed, and hidden in plain sight. I have proof. A small box of letters that waited in the dark, holding dates, names, and the map of my undoing. A river will enter this story, the day a sacred moment became a public wound. There will be a meeting I chose on my terms, where I did not offer forgiveness, only the truth. And there will be justice at last, not the courtroom kind, but the kind that lets a woman sleep with both eyes closed. My name is Patricia, but you can call me Grandma Patty. I am 80 years old and today I'm ready to speak. Before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. Are there hearts listening in Eastern Kentucky? Louisville? The Bluegrass? Type your city in the comments so I know I'm not alone. If you believe that telling the truth can heal what silence could not, tap subscribe and comment listening. Now, open the box with me and see what was planned long before I ever knew. My name is Patricia, but here you can call me Grandma Patty. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, when towns still felt like big families and church bells told the time. Maple Street held our Seventh-day Adventist church, a small brick building with tall, narrow windows that poured light across wooden pews. On Saturdays, we sang low and steady. We shook hands in the yard. Everyone knew whose casserole was whose. Everyone knew everyone's story, or thought they did. I met Martin on a rainy Monday at the drugstore where I worked. He came in with a wet hat and a careful voice, asking for aspirin for his mother. When our hands brushed, a warm flush ran up my arm. In a small town, looks are a language. So are questions. Soon he was walking me home after services, speaking about scripture, work, and the shape of a good life. Orderly, honest, simple. Our courtship kept to the rules. Never alone without others nearby. Never words that might stir trouble. Never more than a handshake. To many that sounded cold. To us, it sounded safe. In March of 1973, we married at that same church. My mother, Josephine, sewed my dress by hand. Long sleeves, lace at the collar, a skirt that whispered at my ankles. Martin wore navy blue and carried himself like a promise. Pastor Miller spoke about marriage as a covenant, as steady as the river that runs outside town, for better or worse, forsaking all others. Words simple enough to print on paper, heavy enough to carry a life. We ate in the hall afterward. No dancing, no fuss, just kind voices, prayer, and a cake his mother decorated with careful sugar roses. I remember thinking, this is what safe feels like. We rented a small place on Oak Avenue, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen that filled with steam when the beans were on, a living room just big enough for a worn chair and our hope. I left the drugstore to keep the home. I stitched curtains and tablecloths. He built a small garden and carried in vegetables, proud as any man holding flowers. We kept Sabbath, paid tithes, and lived inside a schedule you could set a clock by. Some call that boring. I called it peace. Our marriage bed followed the same quiet rules as everything else. No drama, no noise. Respect, not heat. I did not know I was lonely. I only knew I was doing what was right. We prayed for a child. Months passed without an answer. Dr. Adams said to be patient. I believed him. When I could not hold a baby of my own, I held other people's children in Sabbath school. I told stories with flannel figures, handed out butterscotch from my purse, and learned every name. The children loved me, and I loved them back. Teaching them felt like standing in a soft beam of light. Our friends were other church couples with steady shoes and steady habits. On Sundays after lunch, we'd sit at their tables, women in the kitchen, men on porches, talk flowing like the river, work, weather, scripture, who needed help this week. I felt seen. I felt safe. If you grew up in a small town like this, type small town in the comments so I know you understand that kind of safety. Looking back, I see how easy it is to mistake order for truth. When life is neat, you do not look for what is missing. You do not ask whether quiet can hide a storm. I wore my new last name like a sturdy coat. I learned the rhythm of his footsteps on the porch, the sound of his key at the door, the way his voice softened when he asked about dinner. I told myself that was love enough. Hold this picture in your mind. The vows, the simple house, the church light through tall windows. Because later, a different light will fall on a different day by the river, and I will see what I did not know to see. The vows were spoken, the ring was real, but a story can be truthful at the front and still hold a lie at the back, and the first sign of that lie will come quietly, on an ordinary Wednesday night. Routine is a soft blanket when the world feels large. In those early years, my days folded the same way, one into another, like sheets stacked fresh from the line. I woke before dawn. The house was quiet enough to hear the kettle begin its small song. I set out 2 cups, sliced fruit, warmed bread. Martin liked his eggs the same way each morning, and I liked knowing exactly how to make them. There is a comfort in being needed, even when no one says the word. After breakfast, he left through the back door with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to be home by 5. I watched the garden from the window while I washed dishes, the beans climbing, the tomatoes blushing toward red, and I whispered little prayers into the steam. Then I set to work. Sweep, mop, launder, iron. The iron sighed across his shirts, leaving crisp seams and the faint scent of starch. I stitched new curtains for spring and swapped them again when autumn came. I liked the way fabric could change a room without changing the room at all. On Mondays, I joined the ladies on Maple Street. We brought our Bibles and our casserole dishes, our recipes and our quiet griefs. We packed baskets for families who were struggling and wrote cards in neat cursive to the sick. It felt like purpose with hands on it. On Thursdays, I visited Sister Catherine to set flowers for the sanctuary and polish the brass until the candlesticks held the light like water. Sabbaths were our center. We walked to church early, the hymn numbers already posted on the board. Children's Sabbath school was my small heaven, 10 little faces, eager and wiggling, waiting for a story they had already heard but still wanted to hear again. I kept a flannel board in a box and a roll of peppermint in my purse for brave answers. When a child sat very still to listen, it made a still place inside me too. Sundays belonged to friends, Margaret's table or Nancy's porch, where talk moved easy across coffee and cornbread. The men's voices rose and fell over the week's work and the pastor's message. The women traded patterns and garden tricks and small kindnesses. By the time we walked home, the sun had slipped low behind the maples, and the street lamps were halos around moths. Evenings were the slowest part. Martin would settle in his chair with a newspaper or his Bible. I took the rocker, embroidery in my lap, and let the needle find its rhythm. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. Silence can be friendly. It can also be a careful guest you don't want to disturb. I told myself peace and quiet were twins. I didn't ask which one was sitting beside me. We had our calendar marked like a hymn. Tuesday prayer, Wednesday Bible study, Friday sundown, Sabbath rest. There is a music to a week when you keep time like that. You know when to bow your head and when to lift it. You know when to open the door and when to lock it. And if anything shifts, even a single note, you feel it somewhere in your bones, though you might not know why. We kept our marriage the way we kept our house, tidy. We did not raise our voices. We did not let dishes sit in the sink. We did not go to bed angry because we did not name the things that might make us angry. Duty stood where words might have stood. Respect filled the spaces where we did not know how to ask for more. If you've ever lived by the clock and found comfort in its ticking, type routine. So I know you understand. Looking back, I can see the shape of a warning hiding in that order. When love is very quiet, lies can learn the same quiet. They take up the empty chair and fold their hands and wait. In those days, I only saw what was lovely. The sheen on a newly ironed sleeve, the soft weight of bread cooling on a rack, my husband's hat on its hook by the door. I did not see the space opening beside those things, the space where a storm could fit. Wednesdays were my favorite once. Midweek meant fellowship and study, a lift to carry us the rest of the way to Sabbath. I set out his best shirt and polished his shoes, because I believed we were getting ready for holy things. I still believe in holy things. But soon, Wednesday would learn a new meaning in our house. And the first hint of that change would not thunder, it would whisper. Change doesn't knock. It slips in like a draft you can't find the crack for. The first change smelled like pomade. Martin had always been quick in the mornings. Water, towel, shirt, door. Then one week he began staying longer in the bathroom. The mirror fogged twice instead of once. The comb lines in his hair were straighter, sharper, held with a new shine that carried a sweet, heavy scent. He asked me to buy that brand again. "Looks proper for a deacon," he said, smoothing the sides until not one hair dared wander. His hands changed next. For years they were the hands of a shopman, calloused, nicked, a little grease at the nail beds no matter how hard he scrubbed. Now he kept a small brush by the sink. He scrubbed under each nail like he was getting ready for surgery. At night, he held out his palms and asked for the new hand cream. "Cracks in winter," he said. He was right. Winter does that. But I had known his winters. This one felt polished. He started leaving by the front door, too. It opened into the living room where all was tidy, Bible on the end table, throw folded square. He'd pause there, straighten a frame, lift a cushion, look the room over as if he were checking a stage before the curtains rose. Then he would kiss my cheek and go. I told myself it meant pride. Pride in our home, in what we had made. Dinner talk shortened. Where he used to tell me about tractors with stubborn engines and neighbors with funnier stories, he started saying, "Nothing much," and asking for seconds. When I asked about the men at the shop, he answered, "Same as always," and reached for the bread. The telephone began to ring more often, and it rang for him. We'd only had our own line a short time. Not many folks had the number. He would answer with a low, "Hello," listen more than speak, then step onto the back steps to finish, voice lowered, eyes on the yard. "Church business," he'd say when he came in. "Prayer needs. Sensitive." I respected sensitive things. I still do. But sensitive can also be a door that closes without a sound. Wednesdays grew longer. He had coordinated Bible study for a year, home by 9:30, 10 at the latest. Now the clock stretched past 10, then 10:30. Questions ran long, he'd say, loosening his tie. We stayed to pray. He began carrying mints in his pocket. When he got home, he headed straight to the shower, even if it was late enough that the house itself fell asleep. He said the mind needs hot water after hard talks. Steam does help a tired head. I know that too. But steam also erases a day. Little scents followed him inside that I could not name at first. Not perfume, nothing sharp like that. More like baked sugar and someone else's laundry soap, the kind with a floral note we had never used. I told myself he'd been in a home where ladies had set out coffee and cookies after the study. Our church is generous like that. Still, the scent felt like a thread on his coat I couldn't pull free. He cared more about shirts. "Press this one too," he'd say in the morning, hand on a nicer fabric he didn't wear to the shop. A deacon ought to look right. He wasn't wrong. Looking right matters when you stand in front of people. But I began ironing as if I were smoothing worry, not wrinkles. Once, on a Monday, I found him home early, hair wet, towel on the hook, saying he'd had a headache, and Mr. Harrison sent him home. I picked up his work shirt from the chair. It felt too clean for a half day in a garage. I set it back down and told myself the morning must have been slow. When suspicion comes to a woman taught not to suspect, it doesn't burst in. It sits on the edge of the bed and waits to be noticed. I loved my husband. I trusted my church. Those were not small words. They were the pillars of my life. So I did what people do with pillars. I leaned on them harder. "It's for the church," he said when I asked about the calls. "It's ministry," when I asked about the late nights. "It's proper," when I asked about the new pomade, the mint, the shirts. Maybe you know that feeling, the one where something in your house is out of place, but you can't say what. If you've ever felt a shift you couldn't name, type whisper, so I know you've been there too. I kept setting his plate, kept warming the water for tea, kept pressing the shirts. Routine held me like a handrail in the dark. But the dark was getting a shape. And soon, Wednesday would stop whispering and speak in a voice I could finally hear. Wednesdays used to feel like a bridge, something gentle to carry us from the work week into rest. We'd walk to church under porch lights, share study, share prayer, and come home with the kind of quiet that helps a person sleep. Then Wednesday changed its meaning. He left a little earlier. He came back a little later. "Good questions tonight," he'd say, loosening his tie. We stayed to pray. I nodded and slipped his plate into the warmer. He headed straight for the shower. Steam filled the hallway long enough to turn the mirrors blind. He began to keep mints in his pocket, and the new pomade lived by the sink like a guest who had unpacked for a long stay. After a while, the house learned the sound of his late return. The latch gentle, the back door careful, the pause, then the rush of water. I told myself he was carrying hard stories home from church and washing them off so they wouldn't follow him to bed. That seemed like a kind thing to do. I wanted to believe in kind things. A name floated into our life on a Wednesday. A young widow who had joined the congregation. "Veronica," he said, eyes on his tie, "moved here with her little girl. New to town. We should make them feel welcome." I agreed at once. Welcome is a language I speak. "Let me bake bread," I said. "I'll bring them by on Thursday." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Maybe not yet. She's shy, still grieving. Let me check in first, see what they need." The next week, he mentioned Veronica again. "She's attending the midweek study. Smart questions. Earnest." I pictured a quiet woman in a gray dress, hands folded against loss, and I prayed for her by name that night. On Thursday, I set a loaf anyway and ironed a good tea towel to wrap it. "Tonight?" I asked. "Maybe next week," he said, already patting his pocket to make sure the mints were there. Little changes made a pattern, the way tiny stitches make a hem. He pressed shirts that weren't for the shop. He asked me to try a lighter laundry soap for church whites. He checked himself in the mirror before he left on Wednesdays, then again at the front door, smoothing hair that didn't need smoothing. And some Wednesdays, he didn't go straight to church at all. "Stopping by to encourage folks who haven't been coming," he'd say, already reaching for his coat. Pastoral visits, he called them, though he wasn't the pastor. The telephone rang more near sundown. He'd answer in a low voice, listening hard, yes, and a promise to pray. Then he stepped outside onto the back steps to finish, words thin as thread. "People bring their worries to the church," he told me. "We carry them together." I nodded because that is true. It's also true that worry can be a curtain you don't look behind. The house began to notice a sweetness on his clothes when he returned. Not a perfume. Nothing that simple. More like baked sugar and the soft floral of a different brand of soap. "We sometimes meet in homes," he explained when I asked. "The ladies set out coffee." He smiled in that way that lands between apology and explanation, and I accepted it because hospitality is also a language our church speaks. Sabbath came, and I looked for the widow. I saw a woman near the back, a small girl tucked into her side. The mother's hair was pinned simply. Her dress was plain. She kept her eyes down when people greeted her. When service ended, I made my way through the crowd with a smile and an outstretched hand, but the hallway swelled with well-meaning shoulders, and in the shuffle, we missed each other at the door. "Next time," I told myself, holding my loaf in its tidy towel. "Don't rush her," Martin said that afternoon on the porch. "Grief is skittish. Let me handle the first week or two." The word handle caught in my ear like a splinter, but I smoothed it over with the easy balm of trust. I had always trusted him, I had always trusted our church. Those were heavy habits to set down. If you've ever watched a day you love turn into a day you dread without one thing you can point to, type Wednesday. So I know you understand. I kept the bread warm. I kept the tea towel ready. I kept believing that welcome would find its way to the right door. But some doors open from the inside only. And one Wednesday soon, I would learn that the first step toward truth is stepping out into the night and following where the quiet leads. Past the church lights, past my fear, to a street I'd only walked in daylight. The night I decided to test the truth, I did it gently. "I'm not feeling well," I told him, hand to my temple. "Maybe I'll stay home tonight." Concern crossed his face, then duty followed. "I can cancel," he said. "They can manage without me." "No," I answered, smiling small. "Go on. The study needs you." He left with his Bible and his mint tin. I waited until the house settled, then put on my coat and walked toward the church. The midweek lights were on. I could see familiar shapes through the windows. Sister Catherine, the Thompsons, a cluster of young people near the back. I slipped inside and took a seat near the door. I did not see my husband. I waded through a hymn and a prayer, then found Pastor Miller in the hallway. "Is Martin here?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "He called," the pastor said, lowering his voice. "Urgent visit. One of the members is unwell. He may join later." I nodded, thanked him, and stepped back into the night. My feet knew where to go before my mind decided. Past the grocer's, past the square, past the last street where the lamps shine bright. Pine Street waits quietly in the dark, a row of small houses with porches that lean forward to listen. Halfway down, I saw it. His bicycle leaned against a low fence. Front basket turned toward the gate like a face I recognized. He had installed that basket for me. "Easier to carry groceries," he'd said, and I had tied a little strip of fabric to the handle so I could spot him in a crowd. That same fabric flicked in the breeze. The house behind the fence was simple brick, curtains drawn. A warm light colored the living room shade. I crossed to the far side of the street and stood beside a tree. I did not knock. I did not call his name. I just stood, hands tucked into my sleeves, heart counting slow, and then fast, and then slow again. Inside, shadows moved. Voices rose and fell too softly to understand. Time stretched. The living room light clicked off. A light deeper in the house came on. A kinder light, private. I felt something in my chest split down the center without a sound. There are moments that do not shout. They stamp your life with a picture you will always see when you close your eyes. For me, it is a bicycle at a fence, a ribbon moving, and a backroom lamp. I stayed longer than I should have. Long enough to know I did not need to see more. Long enough to understand that if I waited to watch him leave, I might never be able to look him in the face again without saying everything at once. So I turned and walked home. I moved quickly through streets I had walked for years, past windows where families were washing dishes and putting children to bed, past doorways that held their own quiet stories. The key felt strange in my hand when I reached our back door. I set the kettle on and sat at the table with my coat still buttoned. The clock climbed past 11. The latch clicked. He came in softly, as if not to wake me. Shoes off. Shirt folded over a chair. Straight to the bathroom. Water on. Steam rolling down the hallway to make our mirrors blind again. I listened to the water run and thought of the river outside town, the one Pastor Miller says can wash a soul clean. I wondered what water can wash away and what it cannot touch. He slid into bed smelling of soap and mint. I turned toward him like any wife who had dozed off waiting. "How was the study?" I asked. "Fruitful," he said, easy as breathing. "Good questions." Stayed to pray. There are lies that tremble and give themselves away, and there are lies that have practiced in the mirror. I said, my voice steady. "I'm glad." He slept. I watched the ceiling until it blurred and tried to name what had just changed. The vows had not moved. The house had not moved. But something had shifted under the floorboards of my life, and I knew it would not shift back. I did not sleep much. I did not cry. In the morning, I made eggs the way he liked them and pressed the shirt he pointed to. I was not ready to speak, but I was no longer the woman I had been the day before. Hold this picture with me. A bicycle, at a fence, a ribbon in a night breeze, a light that moves from one room to another. Soon, there will be another water and another light, and the whole town will stand and watch. The river is coming. The morning was the kind that fools you. Sky brushed clean, air bright enough to make everything look honest. Our congregation walked the path to the river in their good coats, boots soft in the grass. Children skipped stones that never skipped, only plopped, and made circles that spread and spread until they became part of the whole. Baptisms were always beautiful to me. Scripture, prayer, the hush, the water like a page being turned. I stood near Sister Catherine. She pressed my hand and smiled toward the bank where Pastor Miller waited in his waders. The current moved slow, wrapping the ankles of anyone who stepped in, reminding them to be careful where they put their feet. Then I saw her, Veronica, white robe tied at the waist, hair loosed from its pins, face composed the way people compose themselves when they're trying to be brave. Beside the pastor stood 2 deacons to assist. One of them was my husband. He waded in first, steady as a fence post, and offered his hand to the pastor, then to her. The water climbed their calves, then their knees. The congregation drew closer, to the edge. A few cameras clicked like small insects in the grass. I have stood by many rivers. None of them have ever been only water. Pastor Miller spoke about new beginnings. He spoke about leaving behind the weight that drags a soul and rising into light. His voice was clear. The leaves barely moved. Even the children went quiet. He asked her to confess the hope that lived in her heart. She nodded, almost imperceptible, chin to chest, eyes lifted again. "Upon your profession of faith," he said, "we baptize you." Martin and the other deacon placed their hands to support her, one at the back, one at the wrist. It is a tender thing. That hold. Practical first? Yes. So the body doesn't slip, but also protective, the way you steady a person who is about to trust you with breath. They lowered her. The river closed over her face and turned her into a moving shape of light and cloth. For 1 second, I saw only the water rippling above where her features had been. For 1 second, I remembered all the times I had taught children that water can mean promise. When she rose, the robe clung. She blinked against sunlight. The pastor smiled. The congregation exhaled as one. It was all as it should be, except for a few seconds that did not belong to ceremony at all. Martin's hand stayed. His eyes met hers in a way that did not ask for witness. Not long enough to indict, long enough to brand. The second stretched and then snapped, like a thread tugged tight and cut. He adjusted her elbow as if to balance her, as if any of this were only the kindness everyone could see. I felt the world tilt a degree. Not enough to throw people off their feet, just enough to make me reach for something that wasn't there. A sister near me sighed, "How lovely," and dabbed her eyes. I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. The water glittered around their knees. The pastor said, "Amen." On shore, someone began a hymn in a clear, homespun key. The white robe made its soft way toward the bank. My husband glanced up through the leaves and nodded at me. There are public moments that change you privately. The ache is quiet, and you carry it home in your coat pockets where nobody can see it. If you've ever stood among friends and felt utterly alone, type river, so I know you're here with me. We formed a greeting line. I told Veronica I'd been praying for her. She thanked me in a voice that trembled like a glass set too near the edge of a table. Water beaded at the ends of her hair. A child laughed behind us. Someone passed a towel. My husband moved left, then right, always with people between us. Afterward, the congregation drifted back to town, bright as laundry on a line. I walked slower, letting space open around me. The river kept moving, like it always had, like it would tomorrow. It didn't hold anything for long, but it had taken a picture for me that I could not unsee. The lift of hands that knew more than they should, the look you don't give a stranger. On the path home, I understood that Wednesday nights had simply been the rehearsal. The river was the stage, and now the curtain had fallen on the first act, and I was the only one in the audience who knew what play we were watching. I put the kettle on when I reached the kitchen. The house looked exactly the same. The vows on my finger felt heavier. Soon, the quiet would end, and we would step into the part of a story where things you trust give way. But not yet. First, there would be a week of nods and casseroles and wasn't it beautiful? And then the slow, careful unraveling of a life that had been pressed flat and called peace. After the river, the air in our house changed. It wasn't a storm. It was the feeling right before a storm, when the birds go quiet and the dog lifts its head at nothing you can see. I asked to speak with Pastor Miller. We sat in his small office where the window looked toward the maples. I told him what I had seen and what I had felt long before that. Wednesdays that stretched, mints, new shirts, the way a name moved through our life and wouldn't settle. He listened like a man holding a lantern in a dark room. He did not rush. He said there were steps the church would take, and they would be careful, and I would not have to carry this alone. Care travels slowly through proper channels. Truth does, too. There were quiet conversations. Closed doors. A Tuesday evening at the parsonage when Martin was asked to come and speak. He came home that night with a face I had never seen on him. Set, distant, already someplace else. He sat in our chair that wasn't ours anymore and stared at the wall. The next day, a letter came on church paper. Relieved of duties until further notice. It was written in the softest language, yet it landed like a stone. What broke me was not a shout or a slammed door. It was the clean, cool way he spoke when the speaking finally came. "We can't go on," he said, hands folded like prayer, voice like business. "I don't love you in the way a wife should be loved. I'm moving out. No apology. No reach for my hand. Just a quiet statement, placed carefully on the table like a bill to be paid. I did not make a scene. I had been raised to be steady in front of people, even when the only person was the man leaving me. I stood and folded a sweater that didn't need folding and said, "Tonight." He nodded, packed a small case, and took his toothbrush. The front door closed with the same polite click it used every day. It is a strange thing when a sound you've heard 1,000 times learns a new meaning. You expect tears to come like rain, Mine came like fog, slow, low, staying. I took the wedding photo off the wall and slid it into a drawer. I did not throw it away. I could not yet make our past a lie just because the end of it had learned to lie so well. Sunday came. Pastor Miller stood up after the hymn and said, in words that were careful and kind, that Deacon Martin would step back for a season. He did not say more. He did not have to. Small towns can read between lines like scripture. Eyes found me and looked away fast. Hands gripped mine longer than usual. A sister pressed a note into my palm that said only, "I see you." The weeks that followed were a study in starting over. I moved back to my mother's small house on Elm Street. I found work at the new textile mill, where thread sings a tired song and the clock is the foreman everyone obeys. My hands learned a different kind of ache, needle calluses, shoulders set against the hum. I made neat seams that no one would notice and told myself neat seams still matter. Evenings were long. I was too tired to cry and too restless to sleep. I set a plate for Mama and one for me and tried to make food taste like comfort. The Bible sat on the table with its ribbon marking the Psalms. I could not open it. Sometimes faith needs silence. Sometimes silence is what breaks faith. For 2 years I spoke to God only in the small ways. Over a kettle, over a row of stitches, over my mother's thin hand as she drifted to sleep. If you're still with me, if you've ever had to rebuild from the floor up, type strength in the comments so the next person who reads knows they are not alone. People talked, not loud, not cruel, just the way water talks when it runs over stones. I became the divorced woman, which is different from being a woman with a name. Some friends stayed. Some crossed the street. I stopped walking past the church on Maple. I chose other routes. I learned the grocery at different hours. I learned that the world does not end when a ring leaves your finger. It only gets very quiet and then, slowly, it starts to make a new kind of sound. One night, months later, I pulled the photo from the drawer and looked at the 2 young faces who meant their vows when they said them. I do not believe in rewriting a past to make the present easier. We were true at the front of our story. The lie moved in later, and we didn't know how to push it back out. The undoing was not one day. It was many small days that learned the same lesson. What you thought would hold did not. Still, I kept a small corner of my heart swept and ready. Not for a man, but for the idea that life might yet bring something gentle. I did not know his name. I did not know his voice. I only knew that if kindness ever knocked, I wanted to hear it, and in time it did. But that is another chapter. Kindness doesn't arrive with trumpets. It knocks softly and waits on the porch. Wayne came to my life carrying a bundle of shirts and a careful smile. He'd heard I could sew. He was a widower from Louisville, 2 teenagers at home, a supervisor with grease under his nails and good manners in his pocket. He set the shirts on my table like something that could break and said, "If you've got time." I said I did. He wasn't handsome in the kind of way that turns heads. He was handsome in the way a dependable chair is handsome, sturdy, well-used, always there when you reach for it. He looked people in the eye when they spoke. He laughed easy but not loud. When the gate squeaked, he fixed it without comment. When Mama coughed, he brought oranges and left the bag without staying too long. We started small. Coffee at the bakery after my shift at the mill. A walk around the square on Sundays when the town was quiet. He told me about his first marriage. Not fancy, not tragic. Just 2 people who had loved each other and then lost a fight with sickness. He didn't turn his wife into a saint to make himself look better. He let grief be ordinary and holy at the same time. That told me more about his heart than any speech. He never pressed. He never hurried my answers. "What do you like besides taking care of other people?" He asked once, and the question surprised me so much I forgot to answer. No one had asked me that in years. Later I told him I liked bread dough under my hands, and the way new curtains change the light in a room. He remembered. The next week he brought yeast. We married in the courthouse in January. No choir, no aisle, no church paper to announce it. Just 2 rings, 2 signatures, and promises plain enough to keep. He said, "I can't give you perfect. I can give you every day." I said yes because every day is what a life is made of. His children came with the vows. Logan, prickly as a thistle at 17, and Haley, 15, quieter but watchful. They were polite to me and loyal to their mother's memory, which is the right order of things. The house had 3 bedrooms and a yard that wanted a garden. It also had 3 kinds of grief trying not to bump into each other in the hallway. We learned each other by chores first. Dishes together, even when we didn't speak. Notes on the table, back by 6. Save me a roll. Wayne stood between me and the children when lines got crossed. Not with lectures, just steady rules. "Patricia is not your mother," he told them, "and she isn't trying to be. She is part of this family. We will treat each other like it." He was kind but not soft where it mattered. I admired that. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had traded one kind of loneliness for another. Then there would be a small change. A thank you from Logan I almost didn't hear. Haley asking me to show her a stitch. And the house would move a notch toward warm. I didn't expect a baby. I was 36 and busy with work and the whole business of starting over. But hope has a way of sneaking in when you've left a window cracked. When the doctor said yes, Wayne cried the quiet way some men do, jaw set, eyes bright, hand covering mine on the desk. He came home with too many oranges and a list of things I wasn't allowed to lift. Pregnancy turned the house into a team. Logan carried groceries without being asked. Haley folded tiny clothes with the care of someone smoothing a map. Mama sang old songs while shelling peas. For months, the future sounded like small feet. Daniel arrived in June. I remember the way his fingers curled around nothing and made it something. My finger, Wayne's, the hem of a blanket. He was a calm baby, a long sleeper, the kind of child who brings the temperature of a room down just by breathing in it. Wayne swayed him through colic storms at 2 a.m, whispering baseball scores and truck routes like prayers. The teens, no longer quite teens, claimed him too. Logan taught him to throw a softball when he was barely steady. Haley read to him until he fell asleep, her voice making a bridge from one safe shore to another. The house learned a new music, the washer thumping, a kettle starting to sing, a baby laugh, a back door closing and opening and closing again. I stitched curtains the color of early wheat. Wayne planted tomatoes and bragged when they blushed. I caught myself humming. I caught myself praying again, not with many words, just thank you. Thank you, thank you. If you've ever found a second chance that didn't look like a miracle at first, just a person showing up on time, type hope. So, the next soul reading knows it. Happens. Years passed in the good way. Years. Should, measured by school pictures, and shoe sizes and the height marks on a kitchen door frame. The old ache became a scar I didn't feel most days. Peace settled in like a cat on a windowsill. Unshowy, certain, warm. And then, one afternoon many years later, someone knocked at my door carrying a small shoebox full of letters. Peace is real, so is the past. The day the past knocked, it wore the face of a grown child I remembered as a shy little girl. She stood on my porch with a shoebox hugged to her ribs, eyes fixed on the middle distance like it hurt to look at me. "Mrs. Patricia?" Her voice wavered. "It's Melanie." I knew before she said her name. Time changes a face, but not the way someone carries it. I brought her in, set the kettle on, and cleared a place at the table like I was making room for company. Really, I was making room for whatever lived in that box. She held it a little tighter. "I don't know how to do this kindly," she said, "so I'll do it true." She slid the lid off and put the box between us. Paper smell rose, old glue, dust, a hint of something sweet that might have been someone's perfume long ago. Letters. Dozens, maybe more. Envelopes softened at the corners, stamps from different months, careful script I recognized before my brain let me name it. "I found them in the attic," she said, twisting her hands together, hidden in a suitcase under blankets. "They're from back then." I lifted the top one as if it could bruise. The date knocked the wind out of me. January 1974. We were newlyweds then. The name at the top line was his. The closing was his. The space between was a map I had never seen, drawn with the neat confidence of someone who believes paper is a safe place to tell the truth. I read a few lines, enough to learn a rhythm. Complaints couched as spiritual concern, unequally yoked, he wrote. Not about faith, but about temperament, as if I were a mismatch God could overlook if the man in the story looked devout enough on Sundays. Then came the answers, warm and quick, from a woman signing her name Veronica, who said she longed for a life that fit, a love that fit, a church that fit. She comforted him for the weight he carried. She called him brave for considering God's leading. I set the letter down and picked up another. Plans. Not fully plain, but plain enough. A cousin in Louisville who knew a deacon in Lexington. A suggestion that a fresh start might be best made under the cover of grief. No husband in the way, no past to explain. A move to a small town where a church keeps its doors and its arms open. Melanie's fingers worried the edge of the box. I was 8. They told me we were starting over after an accident. But my father, she swallowed. He wasn't dead when we left. He was angry. He had found letters. There was shouting. Then we were on a bus. I felt my hands go cold. The room stayed the same size, but the air got thin. I reached for the kettle just to hear something friendly. When I poured, the tea trembled in the cup like it knew how this felt. "I didn't come to hurt you," she said. "I came because the truth is heavy, and I've been carrying it alone. And because—" she stopped, then began again. "Because my stepfather is sick. Very sick." Silence changed its meaning. It wasn't between us anymore. It was around the table, listening. "He asked about you," she said. "He's been asking. He says he needs to tell you everything himself. He says he needs to ask your forgiveness before he goes." I looked down at the letters, at the looping script that had once written my name on a vow, and then wrote someone else's on a future. I chose one at random. June 1975. A line circled in violet ink. Wednesdays are safest. The church expects me then. The floor under my life shifted again. Not sideways this time. Backward. The river moment, the bicycle, the mints, the late nights. None of it was the beginning. It was Act 2 of a play that had opened in my house without a ticket at all. Melanie pushed a folded paper across to me. An address, a phone number, a date written like a question. "If you want to see him," she said. "If you want him to say it out loud where you can hear his voice and not just read his hand." She blinked hard. "You don't owe him anything. I know that. I'm only delivering what's due to you. The truth." I thought of the girl she'd been, hiding behind her mother's skirt in a hallway at church. I thought of the woman she was, carrying a box up my steps like a person bringing back a stolen thing. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Gratitude can share a table with sorrow. They don't fight like you'd think. If you've ever had proof arrive long after you stopped asking for it, if the past has ever rung your doorbell, type truth so the next reader sees your light. When she left, I sat alone with the letters. I read enough to know I would not read them all. Some truths don't need every page to be true. I tied the stack with kitchen twine and set the box under a chair. The house felt both safer and less so, the way a room changes when you find a loose board. You're glad to know, and now you notice every step. That evening, I told Wayne. He listened, jaw tight, eyes kind. He said I didn't owe the past a single minute more. He also said that if I wanted my own ears to hear the apology my eyes had just read, he would sit in the next room within reach. Melanie's last words kept circling. He wants to see you before he dies, and that is where I will pause, because the next part needs its own breath. He wants to see me before he dies. I set the rules before he came. We meet at my table, I told Melanie on the phone. Wayne will be in the next room. I will speak first. He will listen, she agreed. A time was set. I laid a plain cloth on the table and put 2 glasses of water there. Nothing more. I did not bake. This was not a visit. They helped him up the steps. His son on one side, Melanie on the other. He was thinner than I remembered. Smaller somehow, like the years had taken in a seam. His breath came in short drafts. He tried to smile, and I could see the old habit of it, but the effort bent it out of shape. "Patricia," he said, voice rough. "Thank you for—" "Sit," I said gently, and pulled out the chair. Wayne nodded to him from the kitchen doorway and stepped back where I could feel him, without seeing him. We looked at each other across the table that had seen ordinary meals and birthday candles and 1,000 quiet mornings. For a moment, I remembered the boyish pride he wore on our wedding day. Then I remembered a bicycle against a fence. "I know," I said, and slid the twine-tied bundle of letters to the center. "I know about Louisville. I know about the cousin. I know the dates. I know Wednesdays were chosen because the church would expect you." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the truth was already there, tired and ready to be carried. "I told myself a story," he said, "that God wanted me happy, that I was brave to follow, calling it calling." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I was a coward. I hurt you. I lied. I humiliated you in the very place you trusted most." The room was quiet enough to hear the clock. A car passed outside and went on with its life. "You did," I said, "and you planned it. It was not a stumble. It was a map." He nodded, small and slow. "I am sorry," he said. "I am so very sorry. I know it is late to bring that word to your door." "Late," I said, "and still necessary." He looked down at his hands. They were thinner, but I could still see the shape of the worker in them, the way they remembered tools. "I thought you would stay alone," he said almost to himself. "I told myself you would not move on. It helped me live with what I did." "I did move on," I answered, and let my voice find the steadiness I had earned. "I have a life that fits. A husband who shows up every day. A son who laughs like morning. You did not ruin me. You did not end me. You only revealed what your love could not be." He swallowed. "I came to ask—" He stopped as if the word itself were heavy. "To ask for your forgiveness." I sat with that. It is a large word, and people throw it across tables like napkins. I am careful with large words now. "I will not give you something that belongs to my soul like it is a receipt," I said. "I do not carry hate for you. I do not wish you harm. I wish you peace with God and with yourself, but I will not excuse what you did to me. I will not call it smaller than it was." His eyes watered, not the way of a speech, but the way of a person whose body has decided to tell the truth. "I understand," he whispered. "I don't know if you do," I said, and I kept my voice kind. "Forgiveness is not my duty to deliver to your bedside so you can sleep easier. What I can tell you is this. I forgave myself. I laid down the shame that wasn't mine. I took my life back. That is the mercy at this table." We were quiet long enough for the house to breathe with us. From the kitchen, Wayne shifted a chair, not loud, just enough for me to know he was there. I felt held without being touched. "I'm glad you have someone," Martin said, looking toward the doorway. "I never learned how to be steady. Steady isn't a talent," I said. "It's a choice you make every day." He nodded again. "I wish I had chosen differently." He touched the edge of the letters. "May I—" "No," I answered, calm. "They're not for you. They are the record of what I survived." He met my eyes. "Will you come?" "When it's time?" he asked, and I knew what he meant. "I have already come," I said. "I came to the only meeting that mattered." He tried to smile again and almost found it. He pushed back his chair, and I rose because I was raised to rise when a guest leaves, even if the visit was this. At the door, he turned. "Thank you for letting me speak." "I did not let you speak," I said. "I let the truth sit down between us." "That's different." He went carefully down the steps with his son and Melanie. The air outside carried the faintest hint of rain. I stood there until their car turned the corner and the street became itself again. Inside, I leaned on the door and exhaled. Wayne came and set a hand on the frame beside my head, not on me, and asked, "Do you want tea?" "Yes," I said, and the word felt like closing a book you've finally finished. "If you were at this table, what would you choose?" Type reclaim. If you'd have taken your life back, or forgive if you would have offered that word, there's space here for honest answers. I washed the 2 untouched glasses, dried them, and put them away. The letters went back under the chair. The house settled, and so did I. Whatever justice would mean, I knew it had already begun. Justice did not arrive with papers or a gavel. It came the way morning comes, quiet, inevitable, asking for nothing. 2 weeks after the meeting, Melanie called. "It's close," she said. "He's asking if you'll come." I looked at the 2 glasses I had washed and put away. I looked at the chair where the letters waited, tied in twine. "Tell him I wish him peace," I said. "I will not be there." He passed a few days later. I did not attend the service. I made soup for Wayne, watered the tomatoes, and folded towels warm from the line. Grief was not invited. It did not come. What came was something steadier. Relief without celebration. Release without a crowd to watch it. People think justice is a single moment, a confession, a verdict, a headline. Sometimes it is. For me, justice was a series of small choices that returned my life to my own hands. Justice was saying no to a bedside performance and yes to the truth in my kitchen. Justice was choosing sleep over rehearsing old arguments. Justice was keeping the letters, not as relics, not as revenge, but as a record of what I survived. Justice was Wayne asking tea when other men would have given speeches. Justice was a son who grew up learning that love keeps its promises in ordinary ways. There were no apologies printed in the bulletin, no public setting right. The church remained careful and kind, as churches are when hurt lives among the pews. Small towns edit their stories with soft pencils. I stopped needing edits. The truth had already stood at my table and said its name. I used to think justice meant the world would see what I saw at the river. The look, the hold, the seconds that did not belong to ceremony. Now I believe justice is simpler and harder. It's living long enough and bravely enough that the wound no longer gets to be the most interesting thing about you. 2 men taught me this. One loved like a sermon, fine words, thin walls. The other loved like a house built square, no flourish, no draft, a place you can sleep in when the wind rises. The first left me with questions that chewed through the night. The second left me with grocery lists, shared keys, and a laugh in the morning. If you want to know which love wins, listen to the sound a steady door makes when it closes, and you are safe inside. On a mild evening, I took the letters to the yard. I did not burn them. I boxed them clean and labeled the lid in pencil. What happened? Once. Then I slid them onto a high shelf and climbed back down to the life that was waiting for me. When I turned out the kitchen light, the house held its breath the way a home does when it belongs to itself. I slept with both eyes closed and woke knowing that what needed saying had been said, and what needed keeping had been kept. That is justice, at last. Not thunder, not spectacle. A life reclaimed and lived. That box on my high shelf is labeled What Happened Once, and that's where it lives now. My life is what's happening now. Hot tea in a quiet kitchen, a steady door, laughter that begins most mornings for no special reason. If you're carrying a heavy truth, hear me. You are not alone. Type strength in the comments so someone scrolling at 2 a.m. knows where to stand. Tell me your city, Eastern Kentucky, Louisville, the Bluegrass, or wherever you are, so I can picture the lights of your town when I pray tonight. If this story met you with care, subscribe to Grandma Untold Stories and turn on the bell. We tell true stories gently here. No shock, no noise, so you can breathe while you listen. Share one line below. What helped you heal? What do you wish you'd heard sooner? Who showed up when it mattered? If your heart feels heavy, pause the video, take a breath, drink water, reach out to someone safe. Come back when you're ready. We'll still be here. Thank you for listening, for your kindness to a stranger's life. I'm Grandma Patty. I'm 80. I'm still learning joy. And I'm rooting for you, quietly, faithfully, all the way home.